Full-spectrum deterrence ensures Pakistan's national security, strategic stability and peace in South Asia. He is also the of his devotion to duty, strategic vision and outstanding leadership of Pakistan.
I am greatly honored to have been invited by Pakistan's premier think tank, Islamabad Policy Research Institute, IPRI, to speak on a subject which is current and under considerable debate. There are a variety of views that have been expressed by subject specialists. It's a rich professional debate, and I'm sure that these views will eventually contribute to a better understanding of the issues involved and lead to realistic conclusions. In the entire debate, as the topic indicates, the essence of the conclusions ought to revolve around the stability of Pakistan's deterrence against India, both strategic and conventional, as one seamless concept based on hardcore ground realities. Before proceeding with presenting my views, I would like to extend my sincere felicitations and compliments to General Majid Ahsan and his excellent team IPRI for being ranked 74th in the University of Pennsylvania's Think Tanks and Civil Societies program. To be ranked amongst the top 75 in international think tanks of the world is no small achievement. I think it's quite huge. This is an outcome of the reforms agenda undertaken by IPRI and is a feather in IPRI's and Pakistan's academic cap. My best wishes for IPRI in its continuous quest for excellence and for achieving even greater heights in the future. And may Allah take you to the next target, the top 50, inshallah. Today's subject, stability of Pakistan's strategic deterrence, has rightly been framed by IPRI in the backdrop of the May 25 escalation in the politico-military environments that emerged in the post-Pahalgam period. Hence, as the concept note states, one needs to evaluate the stability of Pakistan's strategic deterrence in that context. Therefore, in order for all of us to be on the same page with reference to the context, I think that it will be useful if I were to read out verbatim the brief concept note so we all know what the reference point is and what is expected as an outcome in today's debate. The concept note given to me states, strategic stability of nuclear deterrence in the subcontinent is a function of the credibility of the deterrence as well as the efficacy of the conventional deterrence to deny the space for conventional war sought by the stronger protagonist in the conflict equation. While Pakistan has come up trumps in the May standoff employing the air and missile force very effectively, a little more space for conventional missile, drone and air strikes has been opened up by India, compelling creation of a rocket force command by the army. Now the key question is, have we restored the stability of our strategic deterrence through our efficacious conventional response, or widened the space for a conventional conflict in a future war? This is the concept note. To begin with, I would like to politely contest the presumptive words "the stronger protagonist" used in the concept note, presumably for India as a pre-war predetermination. In my opinion, the outcome of the May 25 conflict, in which the concept note correctly states that Pakistan came out trumps, a winner, as indeed, if I may add, trumps and a winner in the February 2019 Pulwama-Balakot conflict as well, does not support the term stronger protagonist for India. I would like to think that the side which came out trumps, the winner, in both the fair contests, despite the TSR metrics, that is time, space and relative strength of the battle being of India's choice, not once but twice in 6 years, was the real stronger protagonist, and that is Pakistan. As a professional, I do understand that the relative size of the Indian armed forces has traditionally and universally been projected to foster the impression of India being the stronger protagonist in South Asia. That is why, in fact, the coinage on our side for many years of Pakistan operating under the disadvantage of a conventional asymmetry. This coinage has unfortunately got ingrained in our strategic culture as well, with certain inherent psychological downsides. To me, large size is not the entire story, just as the large size of the combined Arab armies versus the Israeli military does not tell the entire story. There are a number of factors of quality, technology, training, and other force multipliers that ought to be taken into account other than the mere large size of armed forces in order to determine the relative strength metrics of any two sides. In South Asia specifically, the nuclear tests of May 98 by India, followed quickly by Pakistan, the universal wisdom that emerged was that a strategic balance had been restored and that in many ways Pakistan's perennial disadvantage of conventional asymmetry had been addressed considerably. Through the conduct of nuclear tests, Pakistan acquired the great equalizer, and that the ghosts of all-out wars in South Asia, and I repeat, all-out wars in South Asia of the 1965 and 71 vintage had been laid to rest. That is why, in fact, the Indian military planners had almost immediately after the nuclear test started to toy with the idea of finding space for a limited war despite the nuclear overhang. They correctly concluded quite realistically that all-out wars of the 65 and 71 vintage were no longer possible. Pakistan's nuclear deterrence came into strong reckoning and assessments, and thereby delivered on the purpose for which it was conceived and developed. The Indian Cold Start Doctrine was the outcome of that thought process against a nuclear Pakistan. No more mobilizing and massing of entire armies as in Exercise Brass Tacks and Operation Parakram. Only limited wars seeking to find space for operations despite the nuclear overhang, limited space objectives in a limited time frame, remaining well below Pakistan's perceived nuclear threshold. In the years from 98 onwards, as Pakistan's nuclear capability slowly but surely embarked on a well-defined and focused force development trajectory under the NCSPD, it matured and grew into a robust operationalized force as a comprehensive triad in the ASFC, in the NSFC, and in the AFSC. The capability attained the objectives of the policy of full spectrum deterrence. At this point, sometime around 2011-12, even the Cold Start Doctrine, which was reportedly Indian Army-led and did not quite enjoy the ownership of the political government and also perhaps of the Indian Air Force, began to look impractical to the Indian military planners against a nuclear Pakistan, which had by then started to radiate serious deterrence effects through full spectrum deterrence. In fact, on a number of occasions during the ensuing years, Mumbai, Uri, Pathankot, etc., India did not automatically mobilize its independent battle groups or the IBGs within the 48 to 96 hour time frame as was conceived in the Cold Start Doctrine. The Theta Force Reserve, the TFRs, too remained in the cool layers of peacetime stations. It seemed that the Cold Start Doctrine was dead on arrival against Pakistan's nuclear deterrence. It certainly did not figure out anywhere in the escalations of February 2019 or recently of May 2025. Now, some years ago, the Indians reportedly started to work on a relatively less ambitious Dynamic Response Strategy, or DRS. Some of the elements of the DRS, like airstrikes, employment of standoff weapons, drones, and medium-range missiles like the BrahMos, came into play in the May 25 escalation, but fizzled out rather quickly when Operation Sindoor was contested strongly by the Pakistan Air Force, attaining air superiority in a matter of hours, followed by punishing retaliatory strikes by the Pakistani military in Operation Banyan and Marsoos, including the destruction of an S-400 battery. A conclusion that can be drawn, therefore, is that large sizes of a military does not per se bestow strength. There are other factors, like I said, of quality, technology, training, and other force multipliers that come into play and determine as to who comes up trumps. It is the final outcome of a war, limited or broader, that decides who the stronger protagonist might be. To me, frankly, at this point in time, having sent the Indian military reeling in two fair contests, it is Pakistan which seems to be the likely stronger protagonist. The India-Pakistan standoff in May 25 was an event which has generated profound and, if I may say, game-changing strategic effects on the future of war and peace, not only in South Asia, but also in an extended region in which I would like to include China and some other countries of Western Asia as well. There are serious political and strategic fallouts internationally, as well in addition to the substantial perceptive change in the military equation. I would like to express with emphasis that Pakistan's nuclear policy of full spectrum deterrence is based on a robust operationalized nuclear capability, which in itself draws strength from a fully functional triad and an effective command and control system. I have explained its various dimensions at numerous national and international forums. It should also be well understood that whenever a situation of a serious military escalation or a crisis occurs in South Asia, like February 19 or May 25, Pakistan's robust nuclear capability simultaneously generates politico-strategic effects in two directions. In the east, in India, where it becomes a limiting factor on the scale, scope and character of military options that India might consider as possible. In the west, halfway around the globe in Washington DC mainly, but also in some key western capitals on the way, where alarm bells start to ring, compelling willy-nilly diplomatic interventions to manage and cool down the emerging crisis with or without a limited fight. Strategic deterrence and placing a limiting operational cap on crisis escalation are therefore inbuilt in Pakistan's capability of full spectrum deterrence. Unlike India, restraint and responsibility are key considerations in the exercise of Pakistan's nuclear policy. This has been demonstrated time and again. No one in the world is interested in a nuclear Armageddon, except Mr. Modi's India perhaps. In this context, I shall briefly quote a few examples from India-induced past escalations. First, 1986-87, when India's full operational military mobilization with ammunition on Pakistan borders under the garb of exercise brass tacks was called off when India was confronted by Pakistan's conventional forces counter-deployments and subtle nuclear messaging. This was the first in South Asia. 1999, in the Kargil crisis, Mr. Vajpayee's conscious decision to limit India's military responses to within the Kargil area of operations on the Kashmir line of control was a testament to the deterrence effect generated by Pakistan's newly demonstrated nuclear capability in May 98. Next, 2001 and 2, India's Operation Parakram with full military mobilization on Pakistan's borders was called off after 10 futile months when confronted by Pakistan's conventional forces counter-deployments, and this time strong nuclear signaling on at least 3 occasions, including 3 ballistic missile tests of Abdali, Shaheen 1 and Gauri by the SPD inside 4 days in May 2002. Then we come to 2019, post-Pulwama, Modi's risky politico-electoral gamble to hit Balakot in mainland Pakistan with Indian Air Force standoff missiles, which turned out to be non-hits anyway, violating Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. India then backed off when the Pakistan Air Force unleashed Operation Swift Retort, imposing costs on the Indian Air Force and on military targets on the line of control. Pakistan's nuclear capability prevented further escalation rungs, and then too President Trump 1.0 took pleasure in announcing an end to hostilities while visiting the 2 Koreas. And now in May 25, failing to achieve politico-military objectives and suffering humiliating reverses in the air and on the ground, Mr. Modi accepted a rescue ceasefire hastily brokered by the US. The nuclear factor weighed heavily on the mind of President Trump, which he continues to mention till today. Post May 25, I have followed with some interest misguided, uninformed and perhaps shallow opinions of sorts amongst Indian analysts on India's attack against a nuclear Pakistan. A conclusion is drawn that Pakistan's nuclear capability did not deter India from attacking mainland Pakistan, and therefore not only that Pakistan's nuclear bluff was called, but that India also succeeded in carving out the much sought after space for conventional war despite the nuclear overhang. In my opinion, both are anything but half-truths, perhaps quarter. This argument was loosely invoked in February 29 as well by partisan Indian analysts and senior officials. And I think this is more of an amateurish game of point scoring and chest thumping rather than a serious professional conclusion.